Greenfield High School was known for its neatly trimmed hedges, spotless corridors, and the sense of order that ran through every hallway like electricity, constant, invisible, but impossible to ignore. That carefully maintained order was more than just routine. It was a culture, one instilled deeply into every student from the day they first walked through the grand front gates. And behind this structure, like a conductor ensuring each note was struck with precision, stood Mr. Edwards, the formidable headmaster. His very name held weight. No student dared whisper it lightly, and many preferred to avoid it altogether. Mr. Edwards was a man whose mere presence could alter the atmosphere of a room. His disapproving glance, magnified behind those old-fashioned round spectacles, had the uncanny ability to quiet the most boisterous students. He was the living embodiment of discipline, his graying hair always combed perfectly back, his three-piece suit pristine even in the depths of summer. But where most students saw a figure of fear, Daniel Scott saw a challenge. Daniel, 17 years old, with unruly blonde hair and a smirk that often preceded trouble, had always tested boundaries. Rules weren't walls to him, they were hurdles waiting to be leapt. One crisp evening in late autumn, Daniel stood under the dusky sky with a can of red spray paint gripped tightly in his hand. His breath formed puffs in the cooling air as he glanced over his shoulder to ensure he was alone. Then, with one bold press of the nozzle, he began his graffiti, a loud, rebellious statement etched into the back wall of the gym. The paint hissed as it met concrete, a sound that thrilled him. As he stepped back to admire his crude creation, his heart raced with adrenaline. But euphoria doesn't last forever. The next morning, as sunlight poured through the cafeteria windows, Daniel hadn't even finished his cereal when the announcement came. "Daniel Scott, report to the headmaster's office immediately." The spoon in his hand froze mid-air. The thrill of the night before dissolved instantly, replaced by a cold rush of dread. That sense of order was largely maintained by one man, Mr. Edwards, the headmaster. His reputation alone was enough to keep most students in line. His disapproving glance behind those round glasses could quiet even the loudest class. But for Daniel Scott, a 17-year-old senior with messy blonde hair and a growing taste for rebellion, rules were more like suggestions. One evening, under the cover of twilight, Daniel had sneaked onto campus with a can of red spray paint. On the back wall of the gymnasium, he scrawled a crude slogan, bold, defiant, and unmistakably disrespectful. He felt a thrill as he stepped back to admire his work, the hiss of the can still echoing in his ears. That thrill, however, lasted less than 12 hours. The following morning, before Daniel had even finished his breakfast, he was summoned to the headmaster's office. Inside the main building, Daniel walked with a mixture of dread and forced nonchalance. The polished floorboards creaked under his shoes as he approached the heavy oak door with Headmaster Edwards etched into the nameplate. He knocked. "Enter!" came the sharp reply. Mr. Edwards stood behind his grand mahogany desk, eyes narrow and posture stiff, like a coiled spring. The office smelled of leather, ink, and authority. "Mr. Scott," he said, not offering a seat, "perhaps you'd like to explain to me why the back wall of our gymnasium looks like the side of a derailed train." Daniel tried to speak, but the words stuck. Mr. Edwards tapped a silver pen against a stack of papers. "Graffiti," he continued, "is not a mistake. It's a choice. And here at Greenfield, choices have consequences." Daniel's gaze dropped to the desk. His heart pounded. The rumors of what happened to students in this office weren't rumors anymore. They were about to become his reality. Mr. Edwards moved to a tall cabinet and opened it slowly. Inside, Daniel saw exactly what he had feared. A long, thin bamboo cane, smooth and slightly curved. Mr. Edwards retrieved it with deliberate precision. 10 strokes, he announced, for the vandalism. You will also scrub the wall until it is spotless. Daniel swallowed hard. He had heard of students being caned, but the idea of facing it himself was almost surreal. Remove your blazer and bend over the desk, Mr. Edwards instructed, his voice without emotion. Daniel obeyed, his hands pressing into the cool wood as he leaned forward. He felt exposed, nervous tremors in his legs. The cane made a swishing sound through the air as Mr. Edwards tested its flexibility. The first stroke landed with a sharp snap, igniting a line of fire across Daniel's backside. He clenched his jaw. The second stroke was worse, and by the third, Daniel's hands were gripping the desk so tightly his knuckles turned white. Each stroke came with chilling precision. Mr. Edwards was not a man to do things halfway. By the fifth stroke, Daniel couldn't hold back a gasp. His eyes were wet now, blinking back tears he didn't want to shed. Mr. Edwards gave no pause, delivering each stroke with measured timing. The 6th, 7th, and 8th strokes drove the pain deeper. The bamboo bit like a brand, each strike overlapping the last. Daniel's breathing grew heavier, and the final 2 strokes were the worst. He let out a low sob, humiliated not just by the pain but by the knowledge that he had brought this on himself. When it was over, Mr. Edwards set the cane aside and stepped back. "Stand up," he said simply. Daniel straightened slowly, wincing at the raw ache that pulsed through his lower back. He avoided the headmaster's eyes. "You will report to the janitor at 3 p.m. today," Mr. Edwards said. "You will scrub every inch of that wall until the last trace of your vandalism is gone. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir," Daniel mumbled, wiping at his eyes. Mr. Edwards watched him carefully. "You're not stupid, Daniel. You're capable of more than this. But next time you think of proving a point with a spray can, remember this morning. Not just the pain, but the disgrace." Daniel nodded, silent. The headmaster gestured to the door. "You may go." As Daniel left the office, he felt every step in his legs, each movement a reminder of the decision he had made. The corridor outside seemed quieter, almost respectful. Some students had clearly been listening at the far end, but none dared meet his gaze. At 3 p.m., Daniel showed up at the back of the gym with a bucket, scrub brush, and disinfectant spray. The graffiti was still there, his defiant statement now nothing more than a crimson stain waiting to be erased. He rolled up his sleeves and began to scrub, the sting from earlier making every movement uncomfortable. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked, hour after hour, the red slowly giving way to clean concrete. By the time Daniel finished, the sun was setting. His muscles ached, his body sore, but the wall was spotless. He stood back, breathing heavily, and stared at the space he had once covered with paint. It was gone now, washed away with effort, regret, and no small amount of pain. That night, lying in bed on his stomach, Daniel replayed every moment of the day. He knew he had deserved the punishment, even if it hurt more than he could have imagined. But he also knew something else. Mr. Edwards hadn't punished him out of cruelty. The headmaster had delivered justice, old-fashioned and exacting. Greenfield High might not forgive quickly, but it never punished unfairly. And for the first time in a long while, Daniel found himself wanting to live up to that standard, not out of fear, but from the sting of understanding what it meant to cross a line.